Okay, so here are going to be some tricks for dimensioning to kind of complete your floor plan to be the correct size. And some of them are going to be things that are pretty much required, and some of them are going to be things that are just going to be particularly helpful. One thing that I found really helpful is once I had every wall, door, window, and thing placed in my building, I just found it really helpful to take the CAD plan in the background. So I'm just clicking on the CAD plan and I'm just dragging it off to the side so that this way, as I place dimensions, I'm not going to accidentally mistakenly click on the plan itself to dimension to it. Another thing that can be helpful is to, if you really want to keep this in place, so I'm going to Control Z to move it back into place, is to take this plan and to half tone it, or just really dull down the transparency, so that way it's a lot easier to tell the difference between the CAD plan and your Revit model. And so one way to do that is just to right click on the plan while you have it selected and override the graphics in view. We can do it by element, and then if I just set this transparency up 100, might be a little too much, and hit apply, and then even check off to half tone it and apply, we can see then that it really dulls the drawing and makes it so that it's a little easier to tell what is our plan and what is from the just background helpful layout. But it's still going to be something that we can click to and edit to, which isn't great. So that's why I recommend just clicking on it and just dragging it off to the side, so that way you don't accidentally dimension it, but you can still use it as a reference. The next thing, so I'm just going to pan back over to look at my drawing a bit better, is to change our visual style. So right now I'm in wireframe, and I'm just going to change my visual style back over to hidden line. You can also change it to consistent colors if you want, but I don't really see that as all too necessary. And then the other thing that we do want to change and have to change is our detail level. So with this is how I'm going to see the different layers of my wall. So if I change my detail level to fine, I'll be able to see things like the outside of my wall, and then the sheathing, the stud, and then the gypsum wallboard. The issue is the line weight is so thick for those outsides of walls that I can't really be able to click on that stud, because all of the dimensions we're given here are given from the face of the stud, and we need to be able to dimension by clicking on the studs, and we can't because we can't exactly find it. So to make it easy for me to be able to click on the face of the studs, I'm just going to come up here to my settings and I'm going to turn on thin lines, which just temporarily removes line weight. I would never want to print a drawing in thin lines, but this is going to be helpful to set everything up. And then once I'm all done with my dimensions and clicking on everything, I can just turn my line weights back on. But this is going to make it easy for me to be able to select to those lines. Now, when I go to place my dimensions, I want to come up with a game plan of how I'm going to do them. And so what I did in my first kind of test was I focused on just doing all of these dimensions on the north side, and then I did all of the dimensions on the east, the south, and then the west. I kind of just went through row by row to place them, starting with these overall ones, and then working my way into where the walls are, and then where the windows and openings were. Because that's how all of these then are hierarchy. It's going to be your overall dimensions, then from wall to wall, then from interiors, and then the cased openings or the doors. So for that, I want to make sure I'm clicking on the faces themselves, and there's kind of two ways we can make that a little bit easier. The quickest way of getting to the dimension tool is this button right up here for aligned dimensions, but you can also go into the annotate tab, and then there's a button for it right here. So if I go into align dimensions, by default it wants to do the wall center line. So if I try to click on the edge of this wall, by default it's just not going to let me. If I hit the tab key once while I hover over this edge, it will then go towards the edge where I can click on that edge, and then I can come over to this side, hit the tab key, And you can see that it kind of went to the sheathing, so I can just move over a little bit and then get it to that edge. And then to place the dimension, I can click to place it. If I want to change the size of this, because the wall I placed, since I was just eyeballing it into place over here, I want it to be 42 feet, but it is currently 41 feet and 11 3/4. So what I'm going to do is hit escape twice to end the command altogether, and then I can click on either of these walls and see how that now becomes an editable number. I can click on here and I can change it to 42, enter, and it just shifted the walls a little bit to make it 42 feet. After I'm done with a dimension and I have it exactly how I want, a good idea is to click on it and then constrain it by clicking on this lock. But I'm actually going to Control Z to undo placing that dimension altogether, and I'm going to show you another way you could potentially place those dimensions. So again, if I go into the Aligned Dimension tool, instead of it by default going to wall center lines, I can actually say to go to the faces of the core. Because if we recall, if I hit Control Z again, and I just click on this wall, I very fast threw this together, so that's why it says a generic 8-inch wall. But I have my materials here, and the only thing I put in that core was my wall stud of 5.5 inches. So therefore, if I have it where I'm dimensioning to the faces of core, it's just going to immediately go to the faces of the wall stud. So I don't have to worry about tabbing into those areas. So if I go into the Align tool, but I have this dimension as face of core, it's going to immediately try to pick up that face of core. And then I can also come over here and have it immediately pick up the face of core and then click to place it. And I can again have it go from the face of core, click again, and I can even kind of chain these dimensions with each other to be how I want them to sit. And then click one last time to place and hit escape. Now, in order to change any of these dimensions, like I did last time, I can't click on this number to change this number. I have to click on a wall related to it, and then the number becomes something that I can edit. So then I can click on this number and I can say I want 18, enter. And what it did was adjusted the entire drawing to fit so that this could be 24, this could be 18. And in order to do that, it had to take this wall and shift it over 1/4 of an inch, which also made that number 42, which is great. So then I'm going to lock these dimensions into place. I'll click on this one as well and lock it. So that way, as my building moves and shifts, when I add dimensions in, those aren't going to change at all. So with it being, if I go into the dimension tool, having it go to the face of core, then it's automatically going to kind of pick them up. Another way of trying to work with the dimensions and have it be something a little bit more manageable is just to only do them one wall at a time. So or one dimension at a time. So how this one here is a 12-foot 3-inch from this face to this stud's face. So I'm just going to click on this stud's face, click on this stud's, click to place the dimension, hit escape twice to end the command, and then I'm going to click on the wall related to the dimension, which now makes this text editable, and I can type in 12 space 3, enter, and make that wall 12-foot 3, and then take this dimension, click on it to pin it or constrain it. My next dimension then is coming from this face of stud to this face of stud. So I'm going to go back into my dimension tool and say from here to here, click to place it, and it actually came out to be the exact number I wanted, which makes sense. If I require it to be 18 feet from here to here, and I said this has to be 12-foot 3 here, and then also this stud here, if I click on this core face to this core face, this is 5.5, all of that is going to automatically equal out. So as you progress placing your dimensions, some of them aren't going to have to get edited. If I hit escape twice, I end the command, If I want to change where this dimension is, I can click on that grip there and just pull it out. And I can also edit the style to get rid of any like zeros for feet. So I can do something called suppress that. So if I go into my dimension style by clicking on edit type while I have a dimension selected, I can scroll down and I can edit the unit format here to ignore the project settings and suppress zeros when it comes to my units. And then if I click OK, this now just says 5.5 instead of saying 0 feet, 5.5. My numbers are also a little bit smaller in my dimensions, which is how I want them to be, because I changed my scale here. So by default, your scale was 1/4 inch equals or 1/8 of an inch. And if I click on here, or I can also change it up here, if I make it 1/4 inch equals a foot, those text is just going to be a little bit smaller and a little bit friendlier. So again, just to practice placing some dimensions. So my next one, I want to go from this face of stud to the face of stud of this wall. So I'm just looking at where these witness lines for this 6'3", which is the next in line, are going to. And then I'm going to place a dimension from the face of the stud to the face of the stud. And then if I move my cursor up, it'll let me know when it's in line with those ones. And then I'm going to hit escape twice, click on this wall, and edit this dimension to be 6'3". And then it moved that wall slightly over. And then I'll click on this dimension and lock it into place. And again, dimension from this face of stud, and sometimes you do need to zoom in a little bit to make sure you're getting the right spot, to that face of stud. I'll click to place it. And I can do multiple ones of these at a time, but if you're unsure, doing them one at a time sometimes makes it a little bit easier to deal with these numbers. But I can go from here to here and then place all of these in one go. But then I need to make sure I edit these numbers to be the ones that I want all in one go as well. So I'm going to click on this wall, and you'll notice too when I click on this one that these two numbers are the only ones that change, because these numbers are now editable compared to the wall that I clicked on. So I'll do 5 foot 5.5, I believe that's what it was, and then click on this, lock it. I have to click now on this wall, 2 foot 3.5, enter, click on the dimension, lock it, which because these two got changed, these now also got changed or updated with it. And then I would go through and do the same thing for my openings. Revit is going to intuitively go to the center of an opening when you go to place it, which is pretty nice. So again, I'll go into the dimension tool, from the face of the stud to the center of the opening, to the next place it wants to go is the face of that wall, so the face of this one stud, and then I'll just click up here to place it. If I want to alter this where this window is, after I hit escape twice, I want to click on the window itself and edit these numbers. If I click on the wall, I can try to move it, and it might, whoops. Okay, so it did wind up shifting everything over, but sometimes what's going to happen when you don't click on the right part is it's going to say like the constraints are going to prevent that from happening. So those constraints are all of these locked dimensions that we put into place, saying that this has to be 5.5. So I click on this window, click on this dimension, 6'4", enter, which automatically made that 5'11", because it didn't really have a choice. If this all was 12'3" and this was 6'4", this is just kind of whatever the remainder is. And then I'll do another one for where the center of this door is. So I'll go dimension. I just want to double check. So it's coming off of this face of the stud. So that's what I was double checking. I'm just using the scroll wheel to pan over to the center of the door, to then the face of this stud. And then if I want it to be in line with this, I just have to kind of move up and click and it'll be in line. And then I want to move the door over, in my case, just 1/8. So I'll hit escape twice. I'll click on this door and I'll do 4'5", enter. And now that door is moved over. It didn't even seem or look like it moved over a little bit, but I just want to make sure you know that I'm using measurements that are going to be pretty friendly for my contractor, so that way they're not getting there and they have to measure something to be 1/8 of an inch of a difference and things like that. And so at that point, I would have all of these numbers going across the north side of my building ready to go, and they match the dimensions that I was given from the CAD plan. There is another way that you can add dimensions, but this might be something that's a little bit more advanced for some of you. And so for that, what you can do is in the dimension tool, we've been dimensioning based on individual references, but we can actually have it dimension where it just does entire walls for us. And when we do that, it also then gives us these options where we can have it dimension to the center of an opening. We can have it look where the intersecting walls are, or where intersecting grids are as well. So with this option, all I would have to do is click on this wall, and it just is going to create a whole chain of dimensions for me, and then I can click again to place this chain. This is really helpful, but it also gave me a couple of measurements that I just really don't want, because in many cases we're only just going from the face of studs. We're not actually then putting the entire measurement of that stud. So I'm going to hit escape twice to get out of the dimension tool, and then I can go in and I can edit some of these witness lines. So if I click on this dimension, all of these lines that are coming horizontally off of it, these are all what we call our witness lines. So if I want to get rid of any of these, there's two ways I can do it. One is just to right click on that kind of middle grip and say delete witness line, and then it goes away. The other way is up here through edit witness line, and then I can click on the ones I want to get rid of, which, whoops, let me Control Z, edit witness lines. I'll click on the pieces I want to get rid of. Why is it not getting rid of it? Seems to be adding it, which, if I do that to the center, it will definitely get rid of it, but it seems like with walls, it's adding to it. I'll have to play around with that. But for getting rid of things like maybe centers for these windows, for instance, I only would really want the center of this middle one, and it's not coming up. And then if I needed to add something, like I needed to add that one back, I can add it back in. And then just to finish this off, if I just click off kind of in the abyss, it will end the entire thing. So if I want to get rid of individual ones, the way I usually do it is through that right click and then say delete. And if I want to get rid of, say, this one, I would right click on it and delete. And that way I'm only just dealing with these witness lines here for just my entire wall, rather than have them for each one. But in my opinion, this takes just as much time to do it kind of this way as it would if I was trying to do each one individually. So I usually just click on each individual reference rather than do it where it does the entire wall at a time. Now, once I have all of these walls done, then I can start to go and edit any of them that may need to be edited. I'm going to go ahead and lock these two in place because those were already the numbers that I wanted them to be. And then I can go click on this wall and change this measurement to be 6'5½". And then, of course, hit escape, click on the dimension and lock it. And then for my next one, I want 7'8". So I'll click on the wall, 7'8". enter, and then hit escape, click on the dimension and lock it. And then for this one, I want 3'5". And then I'll click on the dimension and lock it. And then I'll work my way in, and I'll just continue going around and placing all of my dimensions and locking them until I have every single one of them placed. And at that point, I'd be free to click on this CAD file and just completely delete it, because I would no longer need it to help build things like my floor and my roof. We'll reference, I just Control Z to bring the drawing back. We'll reference it to get the shape of our roof and the slope of our roof, but we're not going to need it to actually build the roof out. We're not going to click on these lines and reference them like we did in here. Another thing to keep in mind, or a final thing to keep in mind with dimensions, is that when it comes to a Revit file that you are doing by yourself from scratch, you're not going to have a CAD file that you go around and trace. So your numbers are going to be numbers that you are just coming up with on your own. You might have a specific square footage that you need to meet, or a specific boundary perimeter that you can't go over, but you're going to be able to make these numbers up as you go, or kind of as you work. So you can then, when you're in the architecture tab making your walls, you can have it where you are just drawing your walls based off of core exterior faces, and then just say, I want this to be, 30 feet, and it'll just make the wall that's 30 feet. So you can have it kind of go dimension as you go, or you can then just make your general shape and add dimensions after the fact. And as long as you're keeping your numbers relatively friendly, up to like 1/2 inches, sometimes 1/4 of an inch, then you're going to be in a good place. But what you don't want to do is leave any of these numbers or these measurements to be like 30 seconds or things like that, because then every contractor is going to hate your guts. So hopefully that helped a little bit with dimensioning in Revit. Like with all things in Revit, it takes time and it takes practice. And let me know if you have any questions.